Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. I am off to the Kitchener Waterloo Bonsai Society's meeting tonight. And tonight we have 3 guests and they're all potters. So we've got Sophie, Isabela and Wayne coming to talk about pottery and to maybe sell some pots. So off I go. I have arrived at St. George's Church in Kitchener. So let's go in and join in on the meeting.
And joining us here at the meeting. So this is our 3rd in-person meeting, so it's great to be back with relaxed rules. So hopefully the COVID is on a downward trend and we can continue meeting in person going forward. So on the docket tonight is pots. So I've invited 3 local potters to bring their wares. So there'll be lots of stuff for sale. We'll also be having a brief kind of discussion on potting technique, inspiration, methodology, these kind of things, glaze choices, things like that. We do have some members. Nigel's made a couple of his pots. We have some kind of show and tell stuff down there at the back. And then we're also joined by Ken, who is an old member of the club. So he has some really nice mature trees there, some nursery stock in development, as well as some small trainers, clay pots, and some magazines. So the trees are going to be for auction. So it's the same auction form as you guys saw from our last auction. So there's a starting bid at the top, and we'll close that auction at 8 o'clock. Does that work for you, Ken?
Sure.
Perfect. Okay, so that's there. The pottery is up here, and the show tells in the back. So I guess we'll start with the brief kind of chat about pottery. So we have 3 different people who have 3 very different styles of pottery. Everyone kind of chooses pots based on their own preferences, their own styles, their own ways they want to display their tree. Pottery is a very personal choice, so what may not look good for your eye may look good for someone else's. There's some general kind of characteristics that you want to consider when matching trees to your pot, and maybe actually I can use some of the demos here for the demos, so maybe we can turn our chairs around here. Sorry, folks. So in general, you want the pot is like a frame of the tree. So you want to match it in both size and characteristics. And some of the characteristics that you'll see on the pot, we have a beautiful variety of kind of styles here. There's rectangle, ovals, there's drum pots with the rivets, things with more ornate feet and rims and textures and stuff. So all of those can make a difference and give a different feel to the pot. So colloquially, kind of, there's both masculine and feminine characteristics to pots and to basically anything that we're looking through an artistic perspective. So generally, things without any sort of curvature, things that are strong and thick are considered more masculine. They give more of a sturdier, grounded feel, to whereas something with here's a good option. Something with ornate feet, delicate feet, curves in the pot generally give a more feminine feel to the tree, and that incites more movement and a lighter structure. So you can see here, this is a relatively light tree. It's got great movement along the base, and the foliage patch is not super heavy compared to something like this. Dave, is this your tree?
Yeah.
And Dave's done a really good job matching those characteristics with the pot. So we have some really nice feminine curves, some stronger feet. It's not way out there on that side. It's a good balance with the tree, in my opinion. Other things you're going to want to consider is size. So this is both from a health perspective, a aesthetic perspective, both width and depth. So there's different challenges along with both of those. So if you have a thinner pot, the water flow characteristics are slightly different than a thicker, higher pot. Color is also a consideration. when we're displaying bonsai, the star of the show is the tree. So you want to have, if you have a very ornate pot, you want to have a very ornate tree to match it. Yeah, I think that's about it. That's all I kind of wanted to say. Anyone else, any comments on pot choice, matching pots, things like this?
I think these are all beautifully paired.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so good pots are hard to find generally in our Canadian bonsai culture. We're very lucky to have local potters that make pots. They're tough to find. They're not at regular stores. They're not at regular garden centers. Personally, most of my pots I would get from local potters, bonsai clubs, and private sales. So we kind of have all three of those here tonight. So we're very lucky to be joined by our potters and have private sale members.
Question about the
yeah,
water. You talked about how different sizes, different depths, features, different characteristics. Maybe you could speak to that.
Yeah, for sure. So if you have the same volume in a pot, but it is very tall, that's going to create a large water column. So that pot is going to dry out faster than the same volume that is wider. So the height is a strong characteristic for that. So if you have a tall pot that's for a semi-cascade or a full cascade, that pot's going to drain out much faster. Conversely, if you have a really shallow pot but really wide, that's going to hold a lot of water because of how fluid properties and water mechanics work. There's going to be it's very difficult to get rid of that water when you're in a long flat pot or a tray or things like that. Often people, if they have a tree like that, they'll tip it up and let the water drain out. That's a good strategy to implement that. I've tried to grow things on small trays or really, I have one really nice Japanese pot that's like this big, and I can't grow anything on it for whatever reason. It's really difficult to manage the water. So that's a really big consideration that you want to match. Similarly, because the container holds what you're growing the tree in, the size of the pot is directly related to how fast it dries out as well. So you need to match your pots with your ability to water. That goes along with the size of the tree, the amount of foliage. Something with a lot more foliage on it is going to dry out faster than something with less foliage. Deciduous trees with high water mobility are going to dry out faster than conifers. Larches are deciduous, conifers are kind of in the middle there. It is all kind of interrelated, all of these bonsai techniques, aesthetics in culture. You have to kind of figure out what works for you and over some trial and error, and then continue to kind of work like that. Soil particle size and content will also play a role in that. If you have a smaller container and a high water mobility tree, you're going to want to select a bonsai soil that holds more water, like akadama or organics or things like that. And then we also have some good examples of some smaller trees and kusumono. Often kusumono pots can be traditionally a little more ornate. They are matching. This is a great example of a nice free-form pot with a little more style or emphasis to it. It's not a traditional. It's got a really nice glaze. It's got interesting features and movements. It's kind of a nanban style, like a handmade pot. It really goes well with this kind of mounding features of the hen and chick. So I think this is a great accent plant and pot combination as well.
Wonderful. Go ahead.
Well, I can go ahead, even though I really don't have much tonight because most of my pots, actually, I use them for my own trees. I haven't done the bonsai pots for that long, so as I'm learning and making, there's going to be more. So I just brought what was left over so you guys can see. Maybe something will catch your eye. Most of that work is wheel work, so I use pottery wheel. And then I either carve the feet or I add them. So this is an example of carved feet when I just take away from what was left from the clay. And this one is added feet with a little bit of a stamp. So this is my work here. This is actually a fun experiment with different colored slips. So I was just trying to create like a crackle design on the pots, imitating the bark, and it inspired a lot of discussion among bonsai enthusiasts because people are saying it's not meant for bonsai, it's too busy, like they didn't enjoy it. But I used it for one of the junipers, and I thought it looked pretty cute. It can also be used as a companionship planter. So this is like different colors of natural clay combined together and cracked. Those are glazed. This one is glazed in a kind of weird way. As you can see, there's some patterns that was made by wax resist. So I used wax to block the glaze from sticking to the pot, and it just created the movement there. And those little ones are handmade pots. So those actually, funny enough, you're gonna wonder like, why is the price so high on the tiny little thing? Like, this takes me much longer than making something on the wheel. The wheel is pretty quick. Like, I can make it relatively fast, but of course the whole process is long with pottery because you have to make it, dry it, then trim it, fire it once for, it's called bisque firing. And then the clay gets a little bit harder. Then we glaze it, we choose a glaze, or we don't glaze it if we want it unglazed, like those were unglazed. And a lot of pots I think that we have over there are actually unglazed. So for the coniferous trees, mostly I think unglazed pots in black and red are traditional, like here. But for the deciduous, often people like glazed pots. So yeah, I think if you guys have any questions about my technique, let me know. But this is just like a really small sample of my work. So thank you for inviting me.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Isabela.
You're welcome.
And you have a YouTube channel, correct?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, so she's just been on a couple of Nigel's videos, and check her out on YouTube if you want to see her stuff.
Yeah, I actually have a video on how to make a pot with stamped feet. So like if you want to see how this was made from scratch, you can watch that. And this one was in Nigel's, because we did it together, right? So that was a fun experiment that happened.
Perfect.
What's your YouTube channel called, Isabela?
It's called Gaean Gardens.
Gaean Gardens.
Here's my card,
Okay.
if you guys want to grab it. And those are just like tiny little sculptures. I like to place them in my garden. So I brought them, I thought maybe we'll speak to someone.
Perfect. And did you start pottery largely for your trees yourself, or was there another reason that you got into it?
For the pottery, I've been doing pottery since I was 15 years old.
Oh, okay.
I went to pottery high school and I did sculpture mostly, but then I started to do more like utilitarian pottery for using on the wheel, and just started to do bonsai pots because I started to do bonsai, so I wanted to learn how to make it, and it's really different. It's a different thing than just making a cup and mug or a sculpture. So I find it absolutely beautiful. Like the shapes, the traditional Japanese oriental shapes are very balanced and elegant looking. So in my older work, like I had a lot of decoration, but now I'm trying to keep it minimal. It's a good practice.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Isabel. Let's give her a round for her.
Yeah, well, of course, you can tell I like colors. And usually I do a design. My pottery teacher would say, okay, make 100 of it. But I just want to make each single one different. And last year, a friend of mine from Ottawa asked me, okay, can you make some bonsai pots? That was the first time I heard the English term of bonsai. So I had to Google it, and I realized, I know this. This is from my culture. So I made some for my friend, and usually Wayne and Isabela would know anything can happen during a pottery making. It can crack when you dry it. It can crack during firing. So I made a few more, and then I put it on Facebook. And then they were sold. So I thought, this is great. I can make all pots different, and they still sell. So that's a great outlet of my creativity. I do have a background in chemical engineering, so I just experiment with the chemicals of glazes. I've been doing pottery for 15 years, but mostly dinnerware and the drinking vessels. But this is a whole new world. So if you try my pots and have some comments, suggestions for me to improve, let me know, because unlike Isabel, I don't know much about trees. I have vegetable garden, but that's about it.
Thanks so much, Sophie. Can you maybe talk about the different kind of glazes and chemicals you're talking about? Do you play with oxides or dry things like that?
Yes, yeah, sure. So first, we can take this one as an example. So this one, you see the marble pattern. So this is not glazed, and it's I wedged two different kinds of clay together. So one is a speckled clay, like the one I used with this pot, with speckle just by the clay itself. But the black clay, it looks more like chocolate now. It's from iron oxide. So iron oxide would give you black or red. So that's in the clay. However, if you have iron oxide, this one, probably, in the glaze, then it gives you, because of the glass in the glaze, it shows the red color, but also a different, it can seal the surface more. It's not porous anymore. And the rutile usually would give you something yellowish colors, yellowish brown, so that can be from rutile. And for cobalt, there are different kinds of firing. There's oxidation firing. So for example, this one is from oxidation. And copper and cobalt would give you green or blue. This one is from a reduction with a gas firing. So because of the flame, it burns the oxygen in the air, in the kiln atmosphere. So the clay, and then it traps the carbon from the clay. And then it gives you a different look. So this one is also from cobalt, but this is a reduction of cobalt blue.
Can you maybe talk a little bit about the difference between reduction and oxidation in firing?
Yeah, sure. I don't know if Wayne wants to talk about it. I know Wayne does different kinds of firing.
Well, I do a lot of firing in a neutral atmosphere. Oxidation happens at a higher temperature. Usually it's like fire. Fire needs oxygen in the air to actually be burning. So glazes are taking oxygen from the air and putting it actually into the pot. Reduction is the opposite. So when you shut all the oxygen from the air, you snuff out the flame, that fire still wants to burn and it's looking for oxygen, so it's actually going to take oxygen out of the clay and take it out of the glaze. So it's actually pulling oxygen out. So when you think of something that's oxidizing, if you have copper ceilings or copper roofs, or it will turn green. So if you took like blood or something, if you oxidize it, it turns bright red. So those are the kind of things that happen in oxygen. And fantastic things come in reduction when you pull out the oxides, or I mean the metals within the glazes as well.
Yeah, and also Wayne mentioned the temperature. So usually you want the pots, unless Connor wants to talk about the winterproof.
Oh, no, sure, you guys are the experts, please.
Well, there are 3 different kinds of clay according to, but if I'm wrong, Wayne and Isabel can correct me. So there are 3 different kinds of clays according to the temperature. The mature temperature they fire to. So usually we get the flower pot, the red flower pot from the store. They're earthenware clay. So they fire to a much lower temperature. It's very porous. So if you, it's great for plants, but because it's porous, it absorbs water, and when it freezes, thaws, going through the process repetitively, then it breaks down. Yeah, so it's easy to tell if you go to a store and you don't know if it's earthenware or not. You can just wet the bottom, and if the water stays, that's the pot. That means it's sealed. Usually it's mid-range fire or even high fire. But if the water goes right into the unglazed area, then that's earthenware. Mid-range fire goes to 1200 Celsius when it's glaze fired. And high fire, that goes to even higher. That's a 1285 Celsius degrees. So I heard a lot of people ask me if it's winterproof, because here we are in Canada, and some of bonsai artists would keep the trees outside. And so it really depends on, first, you don't want anything earthenware, so that'll break down for sure. And second, you want to have the pots with total absorption rate under 5%. So if you ask the potter about their absorption rate, usually they can tell you. And the most mid-range firing clay nowadays and high fire clay, so the absorption rate, most of them under 5%. So they're winterproof, unless it's a sculpture clay. So sculpture clay would have an absorption rate around 7%. Then you need to be careful. And also I find if you put the pot with the tree outside with a shelter, which means it does not go through the freezing, thawing process too much, then your tree will benefit from it, and probably your pots, even if it's winterproof pots, can last longer.
Awesome, that was very great. So it's a combination of both the type of clay and the heat that you fire it to.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's all about the amount of water it can absorb.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, so Sophie mentioned keeping it out of the snow, keeping it out of the environment. That's going to drastically reduce the amount of water that's in the pot. If it's glazed or unglazed on the inside, will also affect the amount of water that is absorbed, because it's sitting next to a root mass, which is wet. So if it's glazed on the inside, it's better protected from that absorption from the pot. Also, to a little bit as well on that, the amount of water that you give the plant, both before winter and during winter, will affect the amount of water that then gets into the pot, because the pot is the container. There's a bunch of techniques to get around these kind of things. If you have a really nice pot, even the beautiful ones from Japan, they're depending on what area that they were created in Japan, those don't hold up to our winter as well. Canadian winter is quite tough. So you can slip it out of the container if it's healthy and strong and the root ball is compact. If you just repotted it in spring and it's had low to medium growth over the summer, then that will infer that the root ball is not very strong, so slipping it out could cause some damage. So you can slip it out. I've seen many techniques, pantyhose, all sorts of stuff. Slip it out of the pot. A lot of people overwinter it in the ground. Get something that's permeable that you're going to cover. That's what pantyhose is pretty good, covering the root ball. Some synthetic stuff. You don't want to cover the root ball with something that will repel water, because then you can't get water to the root ball. And then you can bring your pot inside, and then there's it's going to be fine over the winter. Like Sophie said, Wayne has his absorption rates on his pots. It's a combination of both the clay, I believe, and the firing. Anything to add to that, guys?
Just, it sounds really obvious, but you guys probably know this, but like, think about it that if water expands as it freezes, right? So it's gonna push away at the container. So no matter what the container will be, it's still gonna do that. So we do have to protect it.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I wanted to add, but I'm sure you guys know this already.
I've had like a brass pot sitting outside and it filled with water and frozen. It actually cracked the brass open. So
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what it's made of, titanium or anything.
Yes.
If it gets water in there and it freezes, it'll break it.
Just a little something to add to that too, the shape of the container will affect that. I find things with an inturned lip,
Yeah.
then your root mass is sort of stuck in that space under the lip. So the expansion is going to potentially damage your pot more easily than something with tapered outward lip on. That gives the root ball room to expand upward and outward a little bit when it's freezing.
Great point, Dave. And conversely to the point I mentioned about the health of the tree, if your pot is root bound, really root bound, those roots are forcing out on the side walls. They're applying stress. So having a healthy tree that's not too weak that you can slip it out, but not too root bound that is applying that kind of constant stress, that's just going to an added stressor to the pot over winter. I had a really nice pot that I had a cedar in, and everyone knows cedars kind of grow like stink here. I didn't repot it 1 year. I thought I could get a couple years out of it, and well, that was one of my winter casualties was the pot. And when it broke off, I could see the mass of cedar roots along the edge. So there's obviously a balance between not only the aesthetics of your pot, but also the horticultural aspects of them.
Sophie's explanation of clays, the three types of clays is earthenware, we have stoneware, and porcelain. Earthenware is, I think, 15% usually absorption, and stoneware typically is from 2 to 5, and porcelain is under 2. When it comes to stoneware and porcelain, or what I get a lot of people asking, is it cone 6 or cone 10? Most people don't really know what they're talking about when it comes to cone 6 and cone 10. It's more about the maturity rate, the maturity of the clay, because there are some stoneware that will mature at cone 6 at 1,222, and there are stoneware that will mature at cone 10.
What do you mean mature? I don't.
Mature, when it vitrifies, it actually it melts at
Yeah.
that point.
Okay.
So if you took cone 10 stoneware and you only fired it to cone 6,
It's not.
that is under fire, so it will not actually be vitrified. So of course, it doesn't work that way. So you can take porcelain, the same thing. If you are, or any kind of stoneware or porcelain, if it's not going to be fired at that maturity, it's not going to be at its ideal.
So when you as a potter go to purchase your clay,
Do you see like, oh, this is clay for cone 6, this is clay
Here.
for 10, or?
You can see it, actually, I have a box for cone 6, so it
Says it right on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the metal wrench or clay stoneware that Wayne was referring to. So yes, they just, you have to fire them to certain temperature.
And then typically, like, you can't take stoneware that is made for cone 6. And some people, well, they prefer cone 10, but if you fired actually cone 6 clay into cone 10, it'll melt. So it doesn't actually get harder. It will melt. The difference between porcelain and stoneware is there's a lot more feldspar. The materials are tighter. It's like very, very fine powder. Where stoneware, it's not as fine. So it depends on the maturity. I find that cone 10, stoneware and porcelain is actually harder to get to that cone 10. So a lot of times it actually doesn't hit maturity. For the most part, it's harder to get, and it's really hard on the kilns. And there are stoneware that their absorption rate is 1.2, so it's actually less than, or this is actually 0.5. So porcelain is actually at 1.2. This one is at 1.2. So there are stoneware that have less absorption rate than actually porcelain.
And
Now,
how do you get that number, that absorption rate?
they will actually tell you on this.
Okay, so it's not something you test afterwards. It's,
Yeah, if it's the clay that I actually mix myself, it's just average 2%. If it is on the specifics of when I buy clay, it'll actually say the specs on it. My inspirations these days is trying to bring, well, I got doing bonsai first, probably about 30 years ago. About 30 years ago. So I started pottery for the need for my plants. And so I just wanted to do that. But these days, my inspiration goes beyond that, going into the art part of it. I've been inspired by making my own glazes. A girl, Diane Kreber, who has been a potter, and she's internationally known in a lot of vases, which I love making vases. She specialized in crystalline glazes, so I've been mixing some crystalline glazes, which has been fun, more like glass, so silica, rutile. This one, I have all the recipes for that one. And I've been trying to get more of my artwork, so I've been hand painting things. There's a lot more change since from the beginning that I started like 7 years ago, where I was just using a mold. My future, moving to Manitoulin, I want to start introducing clay and earth from different parts of Manitoulin and implementing them into clay and start making a whole bunch of stuff. So,
There are sources up there?
I've been studying about clays. I can get different clay bodies, make them. You can add like pumice, you can add hair, you can add anything into clay, and as it burns off, it leaves all these different textures in them. So I want to see what textures I can create in clay in the future. I'm already doing it now. I'm actually putting like 20% mesh grog into some stuff that I'm making.
Cool.
And, yeah, that's about it.
Cool. Wayne, a couple questions. Can you describe the cone system for people who might not be familiar with it?
The Orton scale, the Orton system, my goodness. It starts from minus 18, 0, 0, 18, which is the lowest, then it goes 0, 17, all the zeros up to 0, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So, how can I say that without seeing a chart in front of me? Cone 6 is mid-range, typically, but you have to have, that is, help me. I'm not a very good speaker.
Well, so the higher the cone, the higher the temperature that it was fired to.
Correct.
Temperature versus time as well, right? You
Pardon
can't just take it up to that temperature
No, you have to fire
Has to
really,
be at a
really
specific
slowly.
Time period before it's classified
Correct.
as.
If there's one drop of water in something, it'll boil in there and it'll explode the entire pot. So you have to make sure it's completely dry and fire it really slow.
And the cones are actual cones you put in your kiln and they melt at the right
They are,
temperature, right?
So if
Yeah.
you were basically getting a cone 6, you wanted to fire cone 6.
Yeah.
These stand-up cones, you get a cone 5, cone 6, cone 7, and cone 5 will look really dropped, cone 6 will be normal, and cone 7 is halfway down. So each one is specific to melt at a certain point. So that's why they call cones.
Do people, I'm just curious, do people replace, like not use cones and just use thermocouples? Or is it still like,
Well, I have an electronic thermocouple. But I have used cones, especially when you're switching the thermocouple, you want to make sure it's calibrated
Right.
right.
yeah.
The thing about cones is you have to be there to watch them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
With thermocouples, you don't, you build in an alarm.
Correct.
The advantage of running both is if one fails, you got a standby. Because I did some wood firings and the
That'd be the
barometer went
last
down,
resort for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
and we needed the cones to determine the temperature. Because you pulled over a brick and you could see it.
Before you go, David, can you maybe expand on the wood firing? And for people who don't know, this is David Johnson.
He's a great potter. We started like 7 years ago at the same studio.
He makes his own pots. He has a beautiful, beautiful trees. You've
He's
probably
better
seen
than
them
me for sure.
at the Toronto. So we're really lucky to have David here with us.
My pots are so great, I'm afraid to sell them because of the number of failures I have with them, which continues to this day. Anyways, the wood firing is quite an experience. It's the kiln that I fired at is run by Anne Randerad up in Orangeville, and I call her kiln Dante because it's like a 10 to 12 hour project, and the thing is just flaming. Fire's coming out of all the brickwork and everything, and you work the whole time firing this, keeping this thing going. But the results are quite interesting, and because of the fire, the effect of the fire and the placement of the pottery in the kiln, because some of it gets lit by the flame and some of it doesn't, so you'll have two different effects on opposite sides of a pottery. But it's trial by fire, not only for the pots, but for you doing the work, because I mean, it's a long day and night. But the results are kind of nice. But even this spring, I had one of my cone 10 wood-fired pots laying on the ground underneath my benches, and it chipped from the frost. So the point that Sophie and Isabela were making about how you take care of your trees during the winter, like the potters can do their part to do the best frost-resistant pot they can make. Our job is to try to minimize the fluctuation in temperature that Conrad also spoke about. Because I think it was the fluctuation in temperature that made that wood-fire pot chip, and I was surprised to see that. What I do is I put most of my pots under my benches, so they get a little patina on them with all the watering, all the fertilizer, and all the junk we throw on them. And then in the winter time, or before winter starts, I cover them in burlap, so that the sun doesn't hit it all day and then freeze at night. That freeze-thaw, that's what causes a lot of damage. And this pot happened to be on the bottom, where it was touching the ground, so I think it was more subject to water. So just some little things you can do to protect your pots. I know not everybody leaves them outside. A lot of people keep them inside because they don't want to get them dirty, but whatever. That's a prerogative. But if you're running them outside,
Do you dry the pots at all, Dave?
dry them?
Yeah,
No.
like in the fall?
No, I got so damn many, man. I got about eight picnic tables, so the pot's underneath it like this.
Yeah,
I'd be spending my whole life doing that. So I just cover them with burlap, and I think what I should actually do is put gravel underneath it. Put some weed block in there. Weed block first, gravel on top, and then it'll be more porous, and then cover it with more burlap. That'd be the better route.
David, how do you control the temperature in the wood-fired kiln?
You just keep feeding with fire.
So
And
okay.
it's a fast fire kiln, and there's two fire boxes, and there's one person on one side, one on the other, and we just keep firing and it just builds up in temperature. And you basically don't want to have them stoked at both. Anne likes having it one more than the other, so it's really a lot of fine tuning on adjusting it. And it's just an accumulation of heat as it builds up.
So once it gets to the right temperature, then how do you stop the fire getting more intense? Do you
Stop feeding
just stop feeding it?
You stop feeding it.
Okay,
And we watch for the cone to drop.
I see.
That's the main thing we see. And it's like, I think it's 2,300 Fahrenheit. Does that sound right to you guys? Like, I don't know what the Celsius is, but. And when we reach that, we stop feeding it, and there's lots of heat in there. Like, we don't open the kiln up for another 2 days
I see.
to let it drop in temperature. And Anne seals the 2 fire boxes up with fiber fax, they call it,
I see.
which is a fireproof material, and just lets it rest, let the heat in there. And it's just glowing, man. Like, I mean, the bricks start going red, the flames coming out of the top of the stack. It's just like hell.
Okay.
At the end of the day, you feel like hell.
Yeah, I betcha.
Thanks, David. And Wayne, I wanted to get back to your beautiful hand-drawn pots. Can you, obviously you don't, or can you explain how you essentially draw on the pot?
Essentially draw on the pot.
Or how
I start
do you
on
do
this.
that?
I start on greenware, so before it's actually fired. I just use paint and using my old Japanese calligraphy style. I just paint on greenware, and then biscuit, and then I just put a clear glaze over it. But it's fun. I used to do a lot of paintings when I was a kid, and a lot of them are hanging in my sister's home. So I just thought I'd try to do more painting.
Is it with underglaze?
It is with underglaze.
Okay. And is that what physically is that? Is it a traditional paint? Is it like specific to pottery?
Basically, stoneware or clay, just colored, basically like slip. Different materials to give it color, or different things to give it lots of color.
But is it a special type of paint?
It is meant to fire, usually from cone 6 to cone 10. There's not specific to a cone 6 underglaze or a cone 10 underglaze that I'm aware of. And everyone loves a wood fire pot because it's the original kiln, right? Everyone wants that traditional look of oxidation where fire is taking all the oxygen out of the clay and out of the you And if you've actually seen one of those pots, like when you look at a glazed pot versus the clay, you can actually see it painted on, like you can actually see it. When you actually see a wood fire, the glaze and the pot become one because it actually has taken out all that oxygen and they fuse together somehow, and they're beautiful. But over recent technologies and all the electric kilns and everything, now they can make glazes give you an oxidation look. So a lot of people aren't firing to cone 10. They don't have to get that oxidation look. You can get a lot of oxidation looks by going mid-range. So actually firing to cone 10, like I said, it's hard to get to that cone 10. Sometimes they don't mature enough, so they might be a little weaker. And they're really hard on our elements and our bricks. So, but it's fun. I still love the look of it.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Let's give a round of applause for that. Okay, so just before we get to the fun part, maybe you can just mention where you can find your stuff to buy on when you're not here. So Isabela, you can start.
For me, if you could contact me through email, that would be ideal.
Perfect. And Sophie, you're on Facebook?
Yeah, my Facebook is Sophie's Pottery. SOPHIE. And also my Gmail address is also sophiespottery@gmail.
All right, thanks. And Wayne, where can we find your?
I have my own website, artisanworks.ca, and right now there's not a lot of pots that hit my store before they're sold.
Nice problem now.
Yeah, it's good. So,
Yeah.
I do. Usually, what happens is when I get a batch of pots, people who subscribe to my email, they get a blast of what's going to come up in 3 or 4 days, and usually they're gone before they actually hit my web store. So subscribe.
Ended the auction by a couple minutes, if that's okay with you, Ken. Again, to reiterate, we have mature nursery stock trees up for bidding, silent auction style, right? Your initials here and your bid. Ken, you're just selling these straight, everything else pretty much?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, and then potters are up here. They have their stuff labeled, e-transfer, and then I think Wayne has a card.
So who are the winners?
Okay.
I got this one.
Who is that one?
This is me.
Oh,
you?
nice,
Yes.
Connor,
Okay.
nice. That's old.
I haven't seen one this small of a leaf before.
Well, it's been in my garden for I don't know how many years, long time. And you know,
Which one do you want?
Very cool, very cool.
Beautiful. It's got a great form to it.
yeah, that's
Did you win both of these, Jay?
I did.
Nice. Well, congratulations.
Thank you, thank you, thank
Some
you.
new members of the family.
One of them might be going to Vince's house.
When's my birthday?
Well, he's driving, right? So
Yeah,
when he
exactly.
drops me off, he's going to take off.
to get here.
I gotta come over here then. And
Hey, it took about $200 worth of gas.
He's going to just do his credit card first.
Oh yeah, no,
Well,
And then I'll.
He's gonna make you carry it out. That's
they're both beautiful trees. They're fantastic. Forest and a tree. You'll have fun with that, Jay.
Now, you know how much I love larch, so I have lots of larch. So to be honest, I was most looking forward to the elm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love this.
Right.
Oh, yeah, it's...
That's cool. I've never heard
And,
of it.
Kind of more that angle.
oh, yeah. And the pot is fantastic, too, actually.
Yeah. That's right.
It's a beautiful pot. Wow. That is
In your
fantastic.
case, speaking about I had a little one, but yeah, this is, I think, Spanish moss, yeah, or like old man's beard or something like that. But yeah, I thought it'd be cool to. So I'll go first. I brought an Amur maple. This was the one we just did in the virtual talk, the pruning. So since then, it's responded really well. It's back budded profusely. I already had to rub off all the buds from the crotches of the branches. So Amurs, field maples, the really vigorous maples will put out a lot of buds from the crotch. You want to rub those out before it starts thickening and getting that inverse taper. But a lot of my pruning decisions were really successful. If you guys remember, I left a lot of the longer growth than what I intended, and I was rewarded with that back budding closer to the trunk here. So a couple good examples of that. I cut back here, and then the buds I'm going to use are actually interior to that. So once everything expands again, probably in the spring, I'll cut back to the buds that I actually want to use. I'll probably repot it at the same time, get it into a smaller pot, get rid of some of these kind of awkward aerial roots, because I don't really want any aerial roots on the maple. I'd like a traditional spreading, flaring base. This branch again is a little tall, but it will be cut back. So really happy with how that turned out, and now I'm just going to let it grow kind of for the rest of the season. Next to it is my Ficus rumfi. So I just brought it in because I thought it was looking really good with the partially developed leaves here. So I did a defoliation when I transitioned it to outside. So if I'm feeling really lazy and I don't want to transition tropicals to full sun, because when you're bringing them outside in spring, especially if the leaves grew indoors, they're very, very susceptible to the UV and the high intensity sun. So traditionally you would transition them slowly, you put them out in full shade almost, and then transition them slowly over several weeks into full sun. A way to kind of skip that if your tree's in good health, which is tough to do if you don't have a grow room or a dedicated lights and stuff, is just to completely defoliate the tree. Then it doesn't have any vulnerable tissue like the leaves to burn. So that's what I did here. I defoliated. I left kind of the growing tips, and they're now starting to flush out. So the ramification is getting there. When I got the tree, it was probably this tall with really long, uninteresting branches. So if you come up and take a closer look at it, you can see my original cut points, and they're healing over right now. So actually this whole apex is new. I originally cut it right here. So I didn't grow the tree. This was purchased from a member in the Ottawa club. So he did actually a fantastic job growing. It's quite an old tree. It's really built into the rock. The rock needs a good scrubbing. It's pretty mossy, but I really love the roots growing in and really wrapping around the rock. It's really integrated to the rock. The roots are kind of molding or flowing over the rock. In the back here, they're kind of growing over each other. I think it's really interesting and natural. They do kind of cross over in some points. So I have considered removing this root. It is a nice root. It would leave a big chunk here, so I'm hesitant to do that. And then this root kind of wraps around it. It's more of a naturalistic approach. It's not a perfect radial root base. Yeah, that's one of the big reasons why I really like it. I also like this big deadwood section in here. It kind of splits the tree in two. I could do a little carving in here. I haven't. It's natural from the original carving, or maybe there's an even larger branch here that was removed. Not too sure about it, but one of my favorite trees to work on, and one of my favorites in the collection. Yeah.
When you cut this tree, is it difficult to like remove everything with the rock, and does it like separate? You have to keep it together?
Yeah, so it's fully attached to the rock, so I pretty much lift the rock. Mm-hmm. It's quite heavy because of the rock. I believe it's some sort of granite or whatever. It's not a light planting by any means. It has a decent, I've repotted it once. It was in a larger container, and then I moved it into this oval, which has like we were talking about pots, it has a nice band here, so it does have a more masculine feel to it, even though it's an oval. I think the oval, the nice curves really accentuate the curved nature of the leaf. The leaves are almost heart-shaped. I do really like the pot as it is. I think the tree is close to be deserving of a nicer pot. There's nothing wrong with the pot. Maybe some glaze. It's an unglazed gray. But yeah, so the roots kind of grow under the rock and around it. So the rock is not. If you have a big heavy rock like this, it's good to put a layer of soil between the pot. You don't want the rock to make direct contact with the pot, because that abrasiveness and the impact, if you put it down slightly harder, can damage the pot. So it's good to have, if you have a larger penjing or like a tall rock, some people put like a mat of rubber between that and the pot, but soil kind of as a minimum. Any other questions?
How old?
I'm not sure. Probably 40 plus years. It is quite an old tree. It's been in bonsai training for a while. It was a senior member of the Ottawa club who unfortunately passed, and their club sold off many of his trees. So I had the chance to purchase this one and my juniper, which some of you guys may have seen in the Toronto show.
it was hard to tell. From over here, I actually thought it was maybe 2 trees that had fused, but it's just one, right?
Yeah.
And they chop there.
Yeah, and I don't know what caused that injury or wound or something, but I do like it. I'm kind of emphasizing it. It's right there in the front. So you kind of just have to take what you get sometimes.
Did you do any wiring on it, or is it just clip and drill?
I have wired it a couple times. Some of these longer branches, so you can see some wire scars here. They're superficial. They're still growing in. I try not to wire whenever I can because I always forget that it's on and then it scars it. So on thin bark things, maples, ficus, what else has a thin bark? Stewardia, a lot of deciduous. The wire bites in really quickly, especially if you apply it before spring. It's good to apply like in the summer. But yeah, mostly clip and grow.
It's a collected larch I got 8 to 10 years ago maybe when I was collecting trees for a forest planting. And this one has that natural movement to it that sort of disqualified it from going into the forest because it just didn't match with the other trees. For quite some time, there was a very large sacrifice off of the side here that's almost healed over. And these gins I let grow out as well. So it was probably well over 1 meter wide at the base while I was styling the rest of it. And then cut back. It's, I just repotted it out of a training pot this year. And I brought it because it's so fresh and healthy looking this year. But it's movement, it's got beautiful side-to-side movement. I designed it because with the gin in mind, this has more character, but the front-to-back movement is better from your side. So I still haven't quite decided which is the front.
Looks good both ways, doesn't it? Wow.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot else to talk about on it. It's been wired on and off for probably 6-7 years at least.
Where did you collect it from?
A ditch up in Grey Bruce, not too far from where I live.
Is this the first flush, or have you already pruned it?
It's been pruned once, and there's I still consider these first flush. They're just popping out as well, but they didn't all pop at the same time this year, so I wouldn't say it's the second flush yet, but it's a later version of the first flush on it. The ones at the top are definitely popping a second, I think.
Where did you get the pot for it, Dave?
I think I got that at Kim's Nature.
Okay.
Yeah.
Looks nice. It's really suits the tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Beautiful feet and everything on it.
Yeah.
How do you maintain a tree like that during the winter?
I have cold frames under my benches, and yeah, just some snow on the surface, and it's gravel in the base of the cold frame, so there's no moisture. They're not sitting in anything wet.
I apologize if I missed it at the very beginning because I was checking out.
That's okay.
The gins, were those just intentional designs, or were they branches that died off and you just took advantage?
They
of
were
that?
sacrifice branches,
Oh, they were sacrifice.
and I wired them because I knew I wanted to keep some dead wood, and larch branches are fairly thick, thick barked, so you have to really exaggerate the size of the branch that you're growing out to become a gin, or they just become those teeny little sticks. So these are big enough that the tree can grow into them a bit. It's still much less mature than hongs. The bark hasn't matured much, and it'll do some thickening up as well, but it'll grow into them.
That's an excellent point. Never ever thought about that. So
Yeah,
you got
thanks.
to almost oversize the branches that you're going to turn into gins.
Right.
If you take the bark off, you're just like,
Yeah, suddenly they're half the thickness. Yeah.
Yeah, so first, the larch, which I I bought some 22 years ago, and it's progressed to this point. So just, there's nothing drastic on it except some wiring that I do tends to bounce back. So I keep having to rewire the tree, certain branches. Like this branch at the back, I want it to sit like so, if everybody could see. A little flatter than, right now it's like the palms of your hand. So my interpretation would go like so. But this keeps coming back. I've tried everything. I've tried guide wires, I've tried heavy gauge wire. I'm noting not to mark the bark. So you all are wondering why the tree is so green. Yeah, it's almost like an artificial green. A gentleman commented, thought it was one of those plastic trees. So there is no secret. What I do is I started last year fertilizing my whole collection with Miracle Grow 20-20-20 at half strength. Its normal mixing rate is 1 teaspoon, in other words, 5 mils per liter of water. So I go to 2.5 mils, and it gets fertilized once a week, and the results are amazing. I picked Miracle Grow because I looked at all of them, and not very many nurseries carry 20-20-20 anymore. It's a general purpose fertilizer. So, and you know, the nitrogen and everything else is balanced. And it features a very great amount of trace elements. And I think trace elements are quite important in the development of growing of trees, healthy trees anyways. So the pots that these plants are in, normally they would be in another pot, but I have a great deal of problems keeping them moist, the soil, the media. So I tend to use a bigger pot to keep them a little bit better hydrated. So both of these, right now, they're watered twice a day, along with everything else. You may think only twice, but it's a lot of work. To water the plant properly, you need to go over it several times. So, in other words, you have for one tree, you water it, say 4 times. And if you have close to 100 trees like I do, you do the math. So that's the larch.
Is that a native larch, Sean?
Yeah, it's a native larch. I was told that it was a Yamadori, so.
Nice.
But I have a hard time finding where the cuts are. But but it's in great shape. It gets winterized in my garden shed, so it doesn't see daylight or sunlight until the following spring. It's in the shed by maybe the 1st of November. So, and same with the Amber maple. This is a nursery stock. Only thing is, in its development, I pinched the new shoots. As soon as it starts to elongate about an inch, then I pinch the first shoot off, and I do that throughout the tree. I have heard people say that this would cause a retardation in the growth, but I haven't found that at all, so I'll continue to do that. And it's given me pretty good results. It's giving me ramification, but it's not giving me, it's not over ramify. I've seen trees that are beautifully ramified, and the branches are like little threads. And I didn't want that. I wanted a tree that is fairly airy. And sometimes I have other trees that I have, you know, it's top heavy, bottom heavy, the pads are really heavy, you know. So this is a great change from that. Any
Beautiful.
questions?
Where's that pot from, Hong?
Which?
The one on the maple here.
That's by Eldon Lees.
Oh, okay. It's an Eldon pot.
Yeah.
It's nice. I like it.
Eldon is or was my mentor. Yeah, he was making bonsai pots, and I bought a great number of pots from him. So if you're looking for something that is unique, come and see me. I might have some for sale. So it's hard to, you know, you have a collection of pots that somebody has done and is no longer doing. I guess they're almost priceless, because there ain't no more. Yeah. So I don't know if you know about Eldon, but Eldon is probably the well-known ambassador of bonsai in Kitchener Waterloo and surrounding area. He and 3 other people started the club. So yeah.
He's still alive, isn't he?
He's still alive,
still
but
alive.
he's
in his 90s.
mostly convalescing. He had a fall.
Okay.
And things didn't work out so well.
He's in his 90s, I think, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
I visit him, but I hate sad stories, and I don't know how much impact I can, but so I just leave him to his convalescence. So. Okay.
I really love the first branch on the Mern there. It's well, both. They both kind of have similar low primary branches that really set the design. I think they're both beautiful.
That's like my trademark.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to mention that for people who are not familiar with Hong's trees, you'll see him in our upcoming show. He has like we talked about with the potters, they have unique style. bonsai practitioners also have a unique style, and hongs are very much like that. It's a strong branch and then a heavy crown, and once you start getting to know folks in their style, you'll be able to pick out their trees in the show without them telling you who's who.
Yeah, because you get working, and instinctively, what you do is fall to the right or fall to the left, whatever your inclination is. And come fall left or right, the first bend comes the first branch. So the progression goes from there.
See you guys.
Did you want to see the trees crammed in the back?
Yeah, let's see that.
Oh, no.
This is Jay's purchases.
Oh, go ahead. It's very sad.
You have to open it.
How do I open it? Yeah, there we go.
like that.
Well, I have to.
Oh. Well, they sort of fit.
Sort of. Nothing broke.
Well, those are great trees. You got them for a great price too. That was a steal.
That was a steal.
That's amazing. That was a fantastic meeting of the KW Bonsai Society, the Kitchener Waterloo Bonsai Society. It was nice seeing all the artists again and their works, and I came home with a lot of pots and a few trees and a couple of books. So I'll show you those on another video. And that's all for today. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the Bonsai Zone.